Reggie McNeal is here tonight to open up a bit more for us what that church might look like. You've heard me say it before. I'll say it again. The church of the 21st century is going to look a lot more like the church of the first century than the last century. It's going to have to be missional. The servant church is the only credible church there is. And mark my words, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel not what we're used to. It's going to make us Episcopalians very uneasy. Yeah. Even some Lutherans feel several weeks ago, we had a retired clergy gathering down at the church center in Ocean Beach. I said to them, I thought I was quoting you. Neither one of us could figure out. It was brilliant, so I had to be quoting it. But I said something Reggie McNeal-esque, like that we needed to be willing to conspire with anybody to do God's mission. And left to go put my vestments in the car. And these two fellows came up to me, and I could tell by the shoes they were wearing, and the ties, and their name tags that they were two young Mormon missionaries. And I thought, God does have a wicked sense of but, let me finish. They said, we hear you doing good stuff here, and want to be a part of it. And Nancy Holland will tell you that they came to work in the center. Tonight and tomorrow in his presentation will open to us up to new possibilities, and new language, and new ways of thinking about church. And in so doing, we have some surprises in store for us and some new departures in the ministry. So, you're all yours. Thank you.
I'm extraordinarily honored to be here, and thank you, Bishop. That's a great word, and I've enjoyed meeting almost all of you that I've had the chance to meet. And just let yourself select it around that. And I get the chance to persecute Episcopalians across the country, and it's just such a thrill. And it just hardly gets better. And I was telling the bishop earlier tonight, if I get, it's not yet, when I get kicked out of my own tribe, I'm going to need someplace to land, and I sure hope I fall into the hands of Episcopalians. A magnificent worldview that I think is broad enough to accommodate some of the expression of church that we're going to need to see. And not every tribe has that. And so you have a broad worldview of the kingdom, what God is up to, and I just want to affirm that. And I want to start with some good news tonight. I only have about an hour and a half, so I want to just at my table. I've seen the wine consumption and the sugar, and I'm surprised you're still here. In fact, you're not here, you're just seated. But I'll try to move on, but let me just start with some good news, because I think that a lot of times North American groups, we're so locked in our own battles and struggles to hang on to what we've got here, spiritually or whatever, that we don't understand the great big picture of Christianity. In the world over, Christianity is the fastest growing religion in the world. And that is not something that most North American groups would anticipate. They would anticipate Islam. And while Islam, of course, is just, it's neck and neck, most of the rate of growth in Islam is birth rates. Whereas Christianity, it's a decision rate. I mean, it's a conversion rate, or it's folks that are leaving. I was just in India. I was telling the bishop in India in November. And almost all of the folks there that are pastoring, there were about 800 pastors out of this group that have started like 40,000 congregations over the last 10 years. And Hinduism, and that's a decision. That's not something they were born into. So what we're seeing is Christianity has great traction in many parts of the world. I mean, India will see 30 or 40,000 people saying, what is this? He keeps reaching out to me in new ways. I can't see down there with my quadrifocals, so I keep running into this bush. And it rained in the devil. Thanks, guys. You travel? I don't want to just, those of you who were in charge of these, I think they were beautiful. They were just right for up now. Are you leaving too? You can't take it anymore. Well, tell pay for us back there. And I don't have any idea what I was saying. I don't know that it makes any difference, really. But India will see 30 or 40,000 people every single day become Jesus followers. And I teach a lot of students, and that is wow, because that is the fastest growing group of believers in terms of the sheer number that we can record. Now, I have students from Asian Rim countries. I teach at Fuller, Pasadena, and my doctoral students there, they come from Japan and Korea and other places, Asian Rim, and they say that communist China is probably outdistancing or outpacing that level of growth, maybe by as much as twice. But it can't be counted quite like you can, and because in many places there, you get up above 15 and you begin to attract some attention still that you may not want to attract. And so, of course, India and in China, these are house church expressions because they don't know how to do church right there. And we're hoping, of course, that they'll grow up and adopt our methodology so they can match our growth rates here. That's kind of what I was there helping. So, in fact, I asked the guy there that had, I said, why in the world do you need me, Sam, to come over here to speak to these pastors in India? I mean, do you need to slow this thing down? You need a speed bump, which is kind of my consultative role. And to tell you you're not quite ready for that, so I can build in the return visit. But it's a remarkable thing that's going on as these folks are experiencing the Book of Acts. I mean, I had several of those folks just in the few days I was there share with me about Jesus speaking to them in their dreams before they were believers. You see, the arm of the Lord is not short. He's not struggling with his mission. He's very active and very capable. And he invades people's sleep even to get the news to folks about what he's up to. I mean, it's a remarkable thing going on. And a lot of miracles and a lot of healing and a lot of, just what's happening there. And it is a picture of where the North American church, I mean, because Jim is right, the bishop's right, we're the only church that makes sense is the serving church. And there in India, where they see this explosion, let me tell you where they moved to, and it's a clue for us. As the leader of that group said, since we no longer are in the church planting this.
We don't plant churches. There is one church. We plant the church. But we go into a village and we begin to serve our way into that village, because proclamation of the gospel is not enough without demonstration of the gospel. And he says, we are going to transform India one village at a time. And I watched it. In fact, we dedicated a building there. They don't call them church buildings. I mean, I know in your tribe, y'all, anyway, you have some challenges around church buildings. They don't even call, they call it a life center. How smart is that? And it is the building that is dedicated to upgrading the life of every person in that village. And so the life center that I was a part of speaking at to dedicate, are training kids to read that have never the first people in that village to be trained in literacy. the first people to be trained in any kind of medical technology or orphanage. I mean, whatever the village needs, they are doing, because they believe that when Jesus says, "I've come to give you life," that he was telling the truth, not just making up scripture. And so it's a lesson for those of us who are in this culture who now need to import from overseas the insights that will let us join the Pentecost that's going on around the world. I mean, my tribe for years exported through our foreign missions, and then it got politically correct, international missions. We exported stuff overseas that wasn't working here. And so now it's time to turn around and actually, with much less hubris and a lot more humility, say, how can we join the movement of God? Africa's gone from 3% Christian to 47% Christian over the last 100 years. I could just go on, and it feels like I will. But of course, as you know, it's not a uniform experience of the Christian church, because we have, of course, parts of the world that are not experiencing this Pentecost, and it just so happens to be everywhere or anywhere the Western footprint went down. Anywhere we do church like we do church here, the church is really struggling. I was in Australia last year. Less than 5% of that population would identify with the Christian movement. Can you believe that? Which, of course, that matches, Washington State, Oregon here. And in terms of our own, what percentage of people in your communities would show up at a church meeting or a church gathering on a particular weekend, it would shock you if you'd actually run the numbers. I wouldn't be surprised on the West Coast for it to approximate, it's certainly the Pacific Northwest, it's single digits. And so, of course, Europe has been there forever. I mean, we're at 2% of the population. At the most, I mean, last year my family was in Austria for family vacation, and it was a national religious holiday. And those of us who were at the back wanting to take pictures of what's going on in the front outnumbered the faithful who were there. It was a national religious holiday, and we couldn't wait for them to finish their stuff so we could get in there and, gawk around. And we outnumbered them 15-1. I mean, I think there were like 4 folks that showed up for the service. It's an amazing thing, of course. And then the United States. Let's just get down to where we live. I was in Colorado the day that the latest Pew study came out. It was in November, and just a few months ago. And I was speaking to about 1,200 Lutherans. And it was interesting because we were working up to Reformation Sunday, and I asked those, where's our Lutheran where's our Lutheran emissary here tonight? Yes, you did a great job, I thought. Anyway, I thought the blessing was fabulous. I was starving to death. I was on East Coast time, and I started to pass up a prayer to you that we could go ahead and get going with it, But there I was with your tribe, and all of these, and as I said, Reformation Sunday's coming. And so I asked those Lutherans, so you've been working on reforming the church for 500 years. How's that working for you? And I said, let me tell you how it's working for you, at least in the United States of America. And the Pew study came out that very day, but it was Above the Fold, USA Today. That told, and here's what's going on. I'll just give you a background. The Pew study, the religious, they release this information every 5 years. 5 years ago, it was a shock to discover that 1 out of 6 Americans chose non-affiliated as their religious conviction. In fact, it is the fastest growing group out of every possible choice that you can make. Not just Christianity, but when you put Buddhism, Hinduism, Satanism, cat killing, whatever your particular, and each of them, we were just with an ex-friend of ours who had given each of our daughters a kitten when they were young. And so cat killing is an acceptable spiritual enterprise. I found out I'm allergic to cats. I took shots to live with the beasts And I fantasized over giving them a shot to live with me. I mean, why should I be the one having the allergic reaction? Why can't the cats have? No, they're fine. I'm the one. At any rate, of all of those options, people go to the bottom of the list and they check non-affiliated. 1 out of 6 Americans 5 years ago. It's 16 point something percent. It's moved up to 19 point, just shy of 1 out of 5 Americans in 5 years. Do you know what it takes to move the needle on that, of a population of over 300 million people? To move from 1 out of 6 to 1 out of 5 in 5 years? We're talking about a massive disaffection to the kind of stuff that we're doing. Now, not you, of course. I'm thinking about Presbyterians, and people really stuck in the mud. It's 1 out of 5 Americans. If you further parse it, it's 1 out of 5 years ago. My kids, I have 2 daughters, 27 and 29. Their generation, 18 to 29, it was 1 out of 5 of their. Anyway, it's 1 out of. It's 32% of that population now. I mean, it went from 25% to 32% in that age group in 5 years. Folks, I mean, these are tectonic shifts, but it's not happening glacially. It's exponential. I mean, it's a precipitous move in our culture away from organized spirituality. Now, by the way, people hear this, they begin to get nervous and think that we're becoming less God-oriented as a culture. Don't believe that. I mean, still, it's true. Only about 6% of Americans are atheists and agnostic put together. And 40% of them say they pray on a regular basis. I don't know to whom and what for, but, just to cover their bases. I mean, what I'm trying to say is we are in a God-intoxicated culture. You can't go to the movies without seeing, gosh, even if it's Les Mis. I mean, you can't go to our movies, you can't be in our culture, or just watch a college football game. And at the end, after the 60 minutes of beating each other up, we go to huddle together to pray in the middle of the field, or listen to any sports. I mean, we're in a God-intoxicated culture. This does separate us from Australia, from Europe. There's still a hope for us in terms of connecting people to this, but we're going to have to do it at an angle that will feel oblique to us, and yet is absolutely essential. And your bishop is right when he says that the church of the 21st century that matters, I'm not talking about institutional expression of religion, I'm talking about the church. The church that matters is going to do just what the church did in the first century when we served our way into people's hearts. After all, it was in the first century that Christians went around and rescued babies off the doorstep, particularly girl babies in that Roman culture that had been abandoned because they were, you didn't want a girl baby. There was no promise in that. And so they were just left for the dogs or the wild animals or the cold or whatever. And it was Christians that went around and took these babies and rescued them and raised them. So, so that a generation later, when all of these Roman men are looking for wives, well, guess where the women are? You see, this is not the fall growth campaign. This is a much longer horizon of looking at societal and cultural transformation. I remember I was at the Colosseum in Rome, and this guy was giving his spiel, and I can't imagine doing that, 12, 13 times a day, but I'm pretty sure they use this same guy that I had to listen to, to get athletes ready to go face lions and, bears, anything. They would do anything to get out of the lecture, I'm pretty sure. let me take a shot at what's going on in the arena. But this guy's just droning on about early Roman history and all when the Colosseum was built. He says, as you know, Romans didn't have there was no germ theory, so they didn't know why when the plagues came through. They just knew they needed to get away from people, so people would leave the country. Everybody would leave the city except Christians who stayed behind because they weren't afraid to die. And he just kept like that. And I want to go, whoa. I mean, it's like a boulder that he just dropped in the middle of that discussion. Except Christians who stayed behind to take care of sickies. And so some of those sickies survived. So when the families came back in from the hinterlands or from wherever it was that they rode out the plague, they had a new virus in their family. So you see, Christians served our way into the place where by the 3rd century, Constantine and all the world had to deal with it and how they dealt with it, and we've inherited the Christendom that came out of that. But the point is, if we can reach back, not just a Reformation, we've got to go all the way back to our beginnings as a movement to reconnect and to join the rest of the world that's experiencing this Pentecost every hour. And so that's what the missional conversation is about. In the morning, I will talk to you if I get to come back, and should you decide to stay, but I would if I were you. You've paid your dues, and you want to get but you sure want to be here to vote on something. In the morning I'll talk about, what we have to do to shift a culture. And I will, in the morning, talk about the church culture. How we're going to have to shift our culture in order. But I just want to give a broader, kind of a broader base explanation tonight that has a little bit of biblical, historical, maybe theological significance to let you know why this missional conversation is not a fad. But I think it's here to stay. And what I find is that people all over America, no matter what tribe you're in, and I was with Church of God General Conference last week. I was with First Pres in San Antonio a couple weeks ago. I'll be with I'm all of these tribes. And here's what I'm discovering. It's a much simpler taxonomy developing in the American church than the taxonomy that you and I inherited as part of being in the legacy of the Reformation, where we have like 30,000 denominations and we're all more right than everyone else. And I'll tell you, here's the new order. It's people who get it and people who don't. It's a pretty simple taxonomy. And the people who get it have more in common with people, no matter what tribe, than they have in common with people in their own tribe that don't get it. Because the new affinity is mission, not doctrine, not polity. Not to suggest these are unimportant, because we're still going to have tribes, we're still going to wear our markings and have our little rituals that got an inside handshake and all. We're still going to have that. But what's going to bind us together as a church is the people, is how we see our role in the world, what mission we think we're on. And so I want to just tell you what I share with folks all over, and then let it kind of form the basis for our discussion tomorrow, in a sense. But if you can't come tomorrow, you just had to be tonight. This would be enough to upset you or mess with you a little bit. I'm always nervous when people, and this didn't happen tonight, but people, sometimes they'll introduce me. He's going to come and upset. Well, why would I do that? I want you to do well. You see, I want us, but I will tell you that what God is calling us out to do is way more exciting than that stuff that brings you no life. I don't think this is so much a challenge as just announcing good news. I tell you, when I go and speak at congregations, it's like announcing jailbreak. I mean, people are coming up like dolphin at SeaWorld for fish. I mean, people are ready to do this. Our congregations are full of people who know the gig's up. That old church stuff is not delivering. But they want to be in on what God is up to, and when we can point the way and release people to that, it is so jazzing. It just beats that other stuff to death. So when I talk about missional, here's what I mean. It's not a particular kind of worship service. Holy cow. Can we just finally be done with this? I mean, arguing over club music and and who gets to do what? And, but it's not about a particular methodology. Here's what it is. When I talk about the missional church, this is what I mean. It's the people of God partnering with Him in His redemptive mission in the world. The people of God partnering with Him in His redemptive mission in the world. Now that may sound kind of innocuous, but I will tell you that is not the church I grew up in. My dad was a Baptist pastor. My two older brothers are Baptist ministers. My two sisters are married to Baptist pastors. My dad's older brother was a Baptist pastor, and my granddad and his 7 brothers were Baptist pastors. I mean, this is how sick, how far I've had to come, how deep in the belly of the beast or whatever you want to. In fact, there's been at least one member of my family that's been clergy all the way back to a chaplain of the Continental Regulars. My family single-handedly has screwed up the North American church. We did it. We didn't mean to do it. It just turned out this way. I'm just doing penance for all of that stuff, And so when I talk about the church that I inherited, I'm telling you, this is family business I'm talking. I grew up kind of like you. Here's the church, here's the steeple, open the church, and here's the people. We didn't get to the people till we got past the church and the steeple. And you're having your own wars right now about who owns the steeple. And I can tell you that the church is not about the steeple. Now, I mean, you could sort out some of the other stuff, but my point is, the people of God, church is not a thing. Church is not something out here. I mean, I grew up in a world where church was a vendor of religious goods and services. You went to church to get your worship pez, or your youth ministry pez, or whatever else. Or church was a place where certain spiritual things, very, very delicately, defined and conscripted, where certain things happened. That was church. So church was outside. It was something that I support, something I ascribe to, something I belong to, something I write checks to, something we hire people to run so we can gripe about their decisions. I mean, it's something out here. Can I tell you that New Testament believers, people in the first century, people in India, where I just was in November, would not do not understand that concept of church. It's a non-biblical notion. Church, in the biblical sense, is the people of God. Now, it's a very organic relationship. It's a relationship. Now, here's a way, and the analogy that I use that kind of helps some people is, look, everywhere I am, no matter if I'm in Australia or India or Southern California or what, no matter, or Chicago last week, it doesn't matter. Everywhere I am, 24/7, I am Kathy McNeal's husband. In fact, she comes up in our conversation even if she doesn't come up in our conversation. She's telling me stuff right now in my head that I should not say, and she's praying for you because she knows me. And, so I'm telling you, you can't know me actually without knowing Kathy. Not that well, because we've been married 31 years and we've known each other 32. You know how this is. I mean, we become, that we're who we are in relationship. We all know this to be true. It's community. I mean, God Himself lives in community and relationship. I mean, our Lutheran friend reminded us in his prayer, his Trinitarian, beginning there. I mean, God lives in community. That's who you can't know me completely without knowing Jesus, because He's just so much a part of who I am. Now, that means that everywhere I am, I'm also the church. Everywhere you are, the church is there. Now, you're not all the church. I mean, I'm not all my marriage. I mean, you got to meet Kathy. You got to see us together. But my point is, it's a relationship. It's an organic, living, breathing relationship that characterizes and colors everything that I do and am. Now, until we get this in our minds, you see, we'll continue then to crank out these little we'll continue to shrink wrap our notion of church down to its congregational manifestation of a group of people that meet together once a week to do the same thing every 7 days, instead of seeing church as a living, breathing organism that's deployed across all domains of our culture. That means church is a way of being. It's not a noun, something I go to. It's a way of life. I church my way through life, just like I husband my way through life, like I father my way through life. I mean, we got to get this. So Kathy, we church in our neighborhood. We church at church. It's okay to do that. We church at school. We church at work. Everywhere we are, the church is. Now that expands the bandwidth of how church is going to look. So that when you're down there in your new place, on Thursday night, is it? You have 180 folks that are coming for for food. To intentionalize that experience, or just to worship together, or the church is there on Thursday night. You don't have to invite people back. This doesn't count. We need you to come back on Sunday and go through another ritual. See, because everywhere the church is growing like crazy, people have figured out how to be church where people already are. Right in the rhythm of their life. And in an increasingly post-congregational culture, that's what we have got to figure out as well. Now, the people of God, as a technical phrase in Scripture, I mean, it gets started, of course, with the call of Abraham in Genesis 12, and we step into that meta-narrative. But I can tell you that what that means as well is that the people of God as a creation comes along way after the mission of God is already underway. The implication for that is that we don't own the mission of God. See, the church doesn't have a mission. The mission has a church. God decided at some point He wanted to create a people that He could cut in on the deal. Not that He's desperate to get His mission done this way. We don't own this sucker, is what I'm trying to say. I did not grow up with that idea. I grew up with the sermons, there's no plan B if we don't do it. That is crock-a-doodle-doo. I'm here to tell you. What kind of God is so... I mean, when God comes into... I mean, we start the Bible in a garden with no church. We end the Bible in a city with no church. I mean, the church is not the fourth member of the Trinity. We don't have, ontological status to equal. I mean, we've got a very specific job to do, and it happens in time, and it's a very special role, and it's simple. And Chris and I were talking about this at dinner tonight. It's very simple. We have one job. The covenant, the deal that God cut with Abraham was very specific. Abraham, I'm going to bless you. Your job is to bless the world. It's that simple. Now, we've made it more complicated than this. And I'm telling you, we have endless capacity to over-complexify things. I think hell is the most complexified place in the universe. Very, very busy and very complex. When as the medieval mystics, I think were right. I think God is very simple. And I think we have a simple job to do, and that's we've got to figure out now how to try. It's how do we build life centers and not churches? How do we operate as gifts gifts to our community, not as just some kind of religious organization, 501c3, it's taking land off the tax roll, and having our little party with very little of our resource eking out. I was talking to a guy today on the phone, you'll think I'm making this up, but he's working in Columbia, South Carolina, where I have a mortgage. And I live on Delta, but I have a mortgage in Columbia, South Carolina. And the truth is, he was talking about a congregation he's working with that has $1 million in the bank. Now, I know that's small potatoes out here in Southern California. But see, his point is, because he called me, and he says, I'm working with, and he says, I'm trying to get this congregation to realize that if they're going to bless the community, just monitoring their bank account hardly qualifies for being people of blessing. I don't know why any kid in the school district where that church is, that congregation is, why any kid doesn't have school supplies. I don't know why any kid in the place where that congregation lives doesn't have food to get through the weekend. There's a lot of things I don't get. But I can tell you that the servant church, the missional church, is not just about our property and what our bank account is. It's about how many people we are blessing and how we are choosing to do it. Now, I'm going to tell a story to end our night here, which is coming up pretty shortly, I'm being told by people all over the room. Listening to me is like practice for eternity. You think it's been hours, and it's just been a minute or two. And so just kind of get over this. But anyway, and I'm paid to speak so many words, and I'm a little behind. And so I got to get the rate out here. So the people of God, it's our job then to bless the world. And and some of you are reading some of the stuff. This starts with individuals helping our people. My favorite story, and it's in some of the book one of the books that you're reading, is still from an Episcopal priest in Beverly Hills, who wrote me the great story. He says it's 3 times he actually wrote emails. And he said, I heard this thing because I challenge people all over. If I were at your church on Sunday, your congregation, I would ask them to go practice being the people of God this week by blessing 3 people. I tell them not to do 4. Let's don't wear this thing out. But, save something for week number 2. But, because God is a God of scarcity, and he's a little nervous about this. So, bless 3 people intentionally. I'm not talking about random act of kindness like rake and run. I'm talking about, doing something because it creates a platform where God shows up and shows off. And I'm telling you, it just happens every time we are people of blessing. And, and I would tell, but I love this story. One of your priests sent me, he says, I decided I would bless the baristas at Starbucks because I go every day. He says, but when I asked them, how can I ask God to bless you? They looked at me like I'm crazy. This was his first email. He says, but I'm going to keep it up, and just see what happens. I'll let you know. Second email was, Reggie, the baristas now at Starbucks are coming to sit down with me when they take their breaks because they know me because I'm there all the time. Now, you see, that's the thing. It's about where we're already deployed. There are people out there writing stuff, and I run into this all the time. And when you hear things like this is going to be uncomfortable, and you should hear stuff, but there are people that think that it doesn't count unless we, give everything we have away and live naked under a bridge for a year or something like that. I'm not talking about wild kind of crazy. I'm just talking about where you are already. How can we be a person of blessing? So this guy says, since I'm there already, they know me. So now when they take their breaks, they're coming in, they're sitting down, and they are telling me all this stuff about their life. And he says, I feel like the chaplain at Starbucks. And then he says, I may have to go somewhere else to drink coffee. And they've closed so many Starbucks, he'd probably have to walk a block. So, this is genuine sacrifice we're talking about here, folks. It's just almost unparalleled. And so, but then his third email was, but I've told my small group, Alpha group about it, and he says, we think we've got every Starbucks covered in 13 blocks. We're going to bless them all. And so his third email was to when he went into Starbucks. He didn't normally go in, as he said, but when he asked the barista, how can I ask God to bless you? She pulled a cup of coffee back. She said, are you one of those blessing people? And I love that story because you know what? She got it right. That is exactly who we are. We are the blessing people. Nobody else on earth gets to do this. Nobody else on earth got this assignment. We're the only people that have been told it's your job to bless the world. You don't have to decide who deserves it. My tribe leave that to my tribe. We're good at that. Y'all just go ahead and be indiscriminate blessers. Bunch of liberals. Anyway. So on an individual basis, if we can help our people just begin to cultivate being a person of blessing, it is so jazzing. Again, I was telling Chris tonight, I sat down, I do this in restaurants a lot because I live in restaurants. And I was, just 2 weeks ago in San Francisco, I want to use a California story so you won't think it's deep south where everybody's a Christian. And so I'm in San Francisco area, Redwood City, Mid-Peninsula, and it's late because I got there late and flew in from the East Coast and having dinner. And this waitress, I just felt the tug of the Spirit. You have to pay attention to be a person of blessing, by the way. You can't just believe in God. You actually have to believe God, by the way, to be a person of blessing. And the devil believes in God. That's no big shakes. But so the Spirit just... So I asked this young waitress, I said, in a minute, we're going to have a blessing for our meal. How can we ask God to bless you? I can tell you, in all the years of doing this, I've never had a waitress throw her tray down or call ACLU and have me thrown out. You cannot be sued for offering prayer to people. You just cannot. Now, if I bullhorned everybody in the restaurant, hey, I'm having a blessing, shut up while I talk to God, then that could be a problem. But offering you know what? Her response was to sit down at the table. She said, well, it's interesting you should ask. Because by the way, you will never, and you can tell your folks this, you will never run into a single person on this planet that God is not already in pursuit of. He is already working in their life. You don't take God anywhere. He's already there. See, that was the old church thing. Got to take God out like in to-go bags. We got him and now you can take him out. How ridiculous. He's already at work. So she sits down, she says, my boyfriend and I, of course, then I ask her, have you been, living with that boy, and when y'all going to get married, and, so God can bless you. I mean, it's important to, challenge her with her lifestyle. So we can have a spiritual, godly conversation. So she said, my boyfriend and I, she said, his grandmother died last week, and he told me one night last week, I need God in my life. She said, what do you think? How can I help? And and so this precipitated this long conversation. The manager comes by several times. He doesn't know who has who hostage here. But he saw we were getting along. And you know what? Toward the end, I said, well, we need to go here. I said, but usually I told you I would pray for you. Would you mind if I prayed with you? Now, I don't do this very often. And she reached across the table and grabbed my hand. First time this has happened to me. She said, I wish you would. See, only church people are nervous about this stuff. We're in a culture that's open to these kinds of conversations if we're willing to move out into them. So being a person of blessing opens that up. Now, corporately, that's where, corporately, we are people of blessing when we decide how can we create venues where our people can get in on this redemptive mission of God that is showing up in the world. By the way, 2 weeks from now, I'll be back in California. I'll be in Sacramento. I'll be speaking at the sex trafficking summit there. Against sex trafficking. I don't know what was so funny about that, but anyway, the way I said it was kind of funny. But Jenny Williams, Jenny went to the state capitol, your state capitol, and she said, I've just discovered there's a lot of sex trafficking going on. I did not know it was going on here in California. Women and children being forced into, the sex trafficking industry and all that kind of stuff. She says, I want to help. They said, good, you're in charge. And she said, no, I came here to help. And they said, look at that long line of people behind you. You're the only one standing in this line. You're in charge. So she's organized this summit in a couple of weeks. And I mean, this is what happens when just one person follows. And I don't know what that's going to be for you, but decides that you're going to make a difference in the world that we are and bless the world and show up in the world. You see, the scorecard, again, I'll talk about this tomorrow. The redemptive mission of God, it's redemptive, meaning everything sin broke, God's addressing, and it's showing up in the world. All of our scorecard is about it showing up at church. So because we've measured church-centric activities so long, how many people came, how many folks, how much money did they bring with them, what was our program, offering, and all that kind of stuff. No, we've got to be smarter than this, and I don't know why Episcopalians can't figure this out. Lead the way for the rest of us. The redemptive mission of God was not designed to play out in church. It was designed to play out in the world. Remember Jesus meeting with Nick at night? Coming up with NFL, end zone scripture verses that they could put. John 3:16. For God so loved the church that he gave his only begotten Son. Plays out in the world. You have a great tradition. You've gotten this. We just need you to help us craft the conversation so that we don't lose our Jesus message in the middle of it, because that's still a very compelling message. But I'll give you one example, one story, then we got to quit. I don't care how much you beg for more. It's East Coast time on my body, so this is kind of like an out-of-body experience. Although I'm a late night guy, and I'm not an early morning. I don't know what it is about early morning service. I do not see the attraction. Apparently, early morning people fashioned the calendar, and then because God's day begins at night. You do know this. Yeah, there was evening and morning the first day. And when does Sabbath start? Sundown. When does Exodus take place? At night. Just saying. When does the Son of God, the light of the world, crawl through a birth canal and show up? Broad daylight? God even turns day into night on the cross, because God's day begins at night. And the day of redemption he was fashioning. When did the resurrection happen? We've got all these Easter sunrise services. The resurrection was history by sunrise. I'm just saying. For you late night people like me, we're right. We're not behind, we're ahead. That's free and it's not worth anything. Although, for those of you who preach, you certainly see the clear implication of the night times of people's lives are that very place of beginning for God to craft a new story. The night time of the American church is God's time to craft a new story, start a new day that we get a chance to live into. Hot dog. So Godfrey Hubert calls me from his sabbatical in Hawaii. He's where every sabbatical should happen. He's playing golf in Kauai. A Methodist pastor. He's been at his church near Houston for 25 years. Now, I don't know what you know about Methodist system, but as you know, that's pretty rare. And so you only get to stay one place for 25 years in that system if you're just either incredibly, powerful or mean as a snake, or you have compromising photographs on the bishop. I think he probably is all those things. But so Godfrey calls me, and he's ready to quit. He's in his early 60s. He says, I just can't do this anymore. But I read something that he picked a book that I'd read, and he says, I didn't know I was the only one that thought like this. I thought I was crazy. I said, well, of course you're crazy. But let's talk. And so we brought him to Dallas, and he and his team, and we were part of a missional Renaissance leadership community. And I challenged them to think about joining God's redemptive mission in the world and how to create an epic win for their congregation and for their community. And this is what I'm doing in different, that's why I was in Redwood City, for instance. And so in their case, I shared with them a simple story about if we're going to show up, the redemptive mission of God's playing out in the world, shouldn't we know what the key leverage points are, these key things that make the most difference? And I will tell you right now what one of them is, and that is literacy. As you know, up to grade 3, a child learns to read, so that from grade 3 forward, they can read to learn. Well, if you never learn to read, you can never read to learn. And so the whole cycle of your life heads in a bad place. And so if a kid gets out of elementary school without reading and moves into illiteracy, and 16% of Americans qualify for this now, it's just a remarkable statistic. And so I just challenged, I said, why does any kid get out of our elementary schools? And I would challenge you the same. In your community, why does any kid get out of elementary school not reading at a 3rd grade level when our congregations are full of people who can? What are we thinking? We are fiddling around while Rome is burning. And we're busy doing church stuff. And so I messed with him a little bit, and I said, so Godfrey got this. And he went back, and in a 3 months' time, he raised $1 million to start the Sci Hope Foundation to serve the Sci Fair school system where his church is located. 110,000 students, 42 Title I schools in one school district. And their goal is to put a Title I school next to a Sci Hope center next to every Title I school. If you don't know what Title I is, that's 95% or better, assisted or free lunch. It's the poverty. It's the third world that's living right here. And so, they've already started 2 of these up. And let me tell you, here's what a Sci Hope Center. It's a place where kids after school can come and get a snack, get help with their homework. A place where they have a place to play that's safe. And they have the Houston Arts Council coming in and doing art classes. And did I mention the symphony, sending people in to teach music? Oh, and did I mention Larry Durker, who's a former Houston Astros pitcher, starting up Durker's Champions, a community league for these kids so they can belong to something organized besides a gang. Already has 2 of these up and running in less than a year. And the last time I saw Godfrey, he said to me, Reggie, he said, I wish I had 30 more years. Now I'm saying that to tell you that the kind of church stuff that we've been doing that has led our culture to be disaffected with us has also led us to be disaffected with our own culture. Many of you are struggling. Clergy, this is epidemic. We are tied to this church stuff that does not give us life. It takes life from us. Because it's running Because, frankly, our church-centric fascination is idolatrous. Because it gets in the way and competes with God's mission, which is a kingdom street mission that people live better lives. It's that simple, but it's that profound. But you know, some of you, and more of you will, as we are willing to renounce our idolatries and our love of Christendom and shatter that and just throw that down and embrace God's mission that's being played out in the world as being the people of God to bless this world. Not only will they find life, you'll find life. It's going to be way more fun than this stuff we've been doing. And you're going to help answer Jesus' prayer that he taught us to pray. Thy church come. So in the morning, I'll talk about how we take the culture that we've received and help that to be a transformative culture that moves us into the kingdom. Cool deal. Thank you.
Come back up here.
Oh, okay.